Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. The meadow's chill seeped into Ilara's knees as she knelt, her weathered hands sifting through the damp foliage. Though the dawn was a spectacle of coral and saffron, her attention remained tethered to the task, assembling the precise herbal concoction demanded for the first trial. Yarrow, to staunch the flow of blood lavender, to soothe jangled nerves and the volatile wolfsbane, handled with reverence, for its duplicitous nature remedy and bane intertwined. Each sprig resonated with echoes of the past. Her grandmother Tudor, soul kin, had imparted the forest's secrets, the whispers carried on the breeze. Ilara had always found sanctuary amidst the rustling canopy and stoic stones, a stark contrast to the packhouse's boisterous confines. A prickle skittered across her skin, unrelated to the morning's bite. The lunar trials loomed. A my-old custom, steeped in ritual and weighty expectations. Females hailing from every corner of the territory would demonstrate their prowess, each vying for the chance to reign beside Ronan Blackwood, the alpha whose influence cast a long, dominating shadow. Ilara desired none of it. A life of peace, of obscurity, was her yearning. But destiny, it seemed, had charted a different course, or rather, Ronan had. Memory surfaced of her parents' sudden, savage end, victims of a rogue assault, and Ronan, scarcely out of boyhood himself, had risen to protect her. From then on, he was both bulwark and provider. The laden pouch slung at her hip served as a constant reminder. She was no longer the abandoned child, but a woman poised on the threshold of a life unimaginable. A life interwoven with Ronan's, by a brand of destiny that felt more like subjugation. An electric hum permeated the air as Ilara stepped into the clearing, the designated arena for the trials. A multitude of pack members were already assembled, their faces reflecting a blend of anticipation and judgment. Pennants emblazoned with the blackwood crest, a wolf snarling beneath an ancient oak danced in the wind's embrace. The ground had been meticulously prepared, marked with hallowed stones. Ilara caught sight of Maya, her confidant, positioned near the periphery of the throng. Maya offered a fleeting, supportive smile, her gaze mirroring shared, unspoken anxieties. Ilara returned the gesture, though it lacked genuine warmth. A sudden hush blanketed the assembly as Elder Talia, her visage a roadmap of ageless wisdom, advanced. Her voice, amplified by the enchantment woven into her robes, reverberated throughout the clearing. Welcome, daughters of the Blackwood Pack. Today we celebrate tradition. Today we seek the one worthy to stand alongside our alpha, to guide us with insight and strength. Talia's pronouncement was followed by the calling of names, each participant stepping forward as acknowledged. Ilara's pulse quickened as her own name resounded across the open space. She advanced, attempting to project a composure she didn't possess. As the final name faded, a collective indrawn breath rippled through the onlookers. Ronan. He moved with a predator's fluid grace, his black leather-fitted jacket molding to his powerful frame, raven hair shadowing his brow. Eyes the shade of a tempestuous sky swept the line of women, pausing momentarily on each face before moving onward. When his gaze locked with Ilara's, a jolt coursed through her, an unwelcome, undeniable spark. He didn't smile. Smiles were rare with Ronan. Yet something lingered in his expression, a flicker of, what? Remorse? Curiosity? or simply the dispassionate calculus of an alpha assessing his pack. The trials commence. Ronan's voice, a deep resonance, echoed through the clearing. The first test, healing. Each of you will be presented with a wounded wolf. You are tasked with its recovery, utilizing your abilities and knowledge. The rapidity and efficacy of your healing will determine your score. A ripple of murmurs swept through the assembled crowd. Healing resided within Ilara's domain. It was the single area where she felt genuinely secure, truly competent. However, the notion of performing beneath Ronan's hawkish gaze, with every action scrutinized, ignited a surge of anxiety. The injured wolves were led forward, each bearing a unique affliction, a jagged tear along a flank, a fractured limb, a mangled paw. Ilara knelt beside a young female nursing a deep gash across her shoulder, fur matted with crimson. The wolf whimpered softly, its eyes reflecting pain and terror. Ilara spoke in soothing tones, reassuring the animal, her voice a calming balm. She reached into her satchel, retrieving the yarrow and lavender harvested that morning. Crushing the herbs between her fingers, she released their aromatic potency, gently applying them to the wound. Her hands moved with well-rehearsed precision, cleansing the laceration, staunching the flow, securing it with clean linen. She murmured a soft incantation, a plea to the forest spirits, requesting their guidance and aid. Around her, the other competitors toiled diligently, each employing their preferred strategies. Some invoked elaborate spells, others relied on prepared potions and salves. Ilara centered solely on the afflicted wolf, channeling her energy and intent into the restoration. Time appeared to dissipate as she labored, her world contracted to the space between her hands and the wounded creature. She felt a connection to the wolf, a shared fragility, a profound empathy for its anguish. When she had concluded, the wound was cleansed and bandaged, the bleeding ceased, the wolf calmer, its eyes devoid of terror. Ilara receded, permitting the judges to assess her efforts. Elder Talia approached, her gaze dissecting the repair. She touched the bandage with care before raising her eyes to Ilara, her expression inscrutable. "Well executed, Ilara," she stated, her tone neutral. "Your gifts are apparent." Ilara inclined her head, offering a respectful bow. She understood that Talia's words provided no guarantee of triumph. The competition was formidable, and Ronan's assessment alone held genuine weight. Ronan had been observing from the perimeter, arms folded across his chest, his countenance unreadable. He had remained immobile, silent, betraying no flicker of emotion. Yet Ilara felt his gaze upon her, a palpable pressure. As Talia moved onward, Ronan advanced, his focus fixed on Ilara. He strode slowly, deliberately, his presence filling the space that separated them. Halting only paces away, his gaze remained intense, unwavering. "You possess a gift, Ilara," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Yet a gift is insufficient. Strength, cunning, and unwavering devotion are also vital to being Luna." His words hung suspended. A challenge and a veiled threat. Ilara met his gaze, her pulse a frantic drum. "I understand, Alpha," she replied, her voice barely audible. The corners of Ronan's mouth lifted in a fleeting suggestion of a smile, an ephemeral expression. "We shall see," he stated, his tone tinged with something indecipherable. "We shall see." He turned and departed, leaving Ilara alone in the arena's heart, burdened by the weight of his expectations. The second trial played out in the training circle, a broad expanse of cultivated earth ringed by stone tiers packed with onlookers. Sunlight flashed off the array of weaponry arranged on sturdy tables. Broadswords, pikes, axes, and bucklers of differing heft and make. Tension simmered in the atmosphere, laced with the tang of sweat and mounting suspense. From his perch on a raised platform, Alpha Ronan, his features in unreadable study, addressed the assembled aspirants. This ordeal will gauge your tactical acumen and fighting spirit. You will be split into 2 factions, each tasked with capturing the opposing banner, positioned at opposite ends of this ground. No fatal force is permitted, injuries will be noted, and undue aggression will be sanctioned. His voice, naturally amplified by the arena's design, thrummed with command. Ilara found herself allied with a handful of women she scarcely knew, their expressions a blend of anxiety and steely resolve. A swift glance revealed a variety of combat approaches, from battle-hardened veterans to those clearly favoring speed over brawn. She noted Gareth, Ronan's second-in-command, give their team a curt briefing, advocating a straightforward charge. Just as Gareth concluded, Ilara stepped forward, her voice surprisingly firm despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Lieutenant, with all due respect, a frontal assault is predictable, easily anticipated. The layout here lends itself to a more subtle tactic." Gareth's brow tightened. "And what tactic would that be, Meadowlight?" His tone was edged with undisguised scorn. "A feint to lure them forward," Ilara suggested, indicating the arena's structure. "Then a smaller, swifter party circles around their flank, using the wood's edge for concealment. It will divide their defense, sow discord, and allow us to snatch the flag with minimal conflict." A ripple of murmurs passed through the team. Several women exchanged doubtful looks. Gareth's expression hardened. "We are using Alpha Ronan's battle plan," he stated curtly. "And Alpha Ronan authorized this frontal assault." Ilara met his glare, unwavering. "Again, Lieutenant, Alpha Ronan tasked us with seizing the flag. Not following orders blindly. A capable leader adapts to the circumstances. A superior plan presents itself." Ronan's voice sliced through the growing dissent. "Ilara," the single word sharpened with a paw. "Dangerous edge." Hushed the arena. All eyes swiveled to him. He descended from the platform, his movements lithe and predator-like. The pack members lining the arena's perimeter shifted uncomfortably, sensing the brewing storm. With each step Kran, the air crackled with suppressed energy. He halted before Ilara, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. "You dare question my strategy?" Before the entire pack, his voice was a low rumble, barely audible yet vibrating through her very core. Ilara stood her ground, meeting his intense gaze. "I propose an alternative, Alpha, one I believe maximizes our odds of success." Despite her outward calm, her pulse hammered in her ears. She knew she was treading a precarious path, but she could not bring herself to yield. The notion of mindlessly adhering to a flawed strategy, simply because it originated from Ronan, struck her as fundamentally unsound. Ronan's jaw clenched, a muscle pulsed. In his cheek, for a long moment, he simply stared at her, his eyes blazing with a volatile mix of fury and something else she couldn't quite name. The silence lengthened, broken only by the distant trill of birds. Then he spoke, his voice deceptively soft. "Very well. Ilara, prove your strategy's merit. You will command the flanking maneuver. But know this, should you fail, the ramifications will be considerable." He turned to Gareth. "The remainder of you will execute the original plan. On my signal." Ilara swallowed hard, the weight of his expectations settling upon her. She had obtained her desire a chance to prove her worth, but the cost of failure had just increased exponentially. As Ronan returned to the platform, Alara quickly assembled a select group of nimble fighters, outlining her plan with precision. She could feel Ronan's gaze boring into her spine, a tangible pressure that fueled her resolve. The horn blared, signaling the commencement of the trial. Gareth and the main contingent surged forward, a tide of warriors crashing against the opposing side's lines. The clang of steel reverberated through the arena, a cacophony of exertion. And battle cries. Ilara, guiding her squad, moved silently through the trees, using the shadows to obscure their advance. They moved with haste, their footsteps muted by the rich soil. Ilara's heightened awareness allowed her to predict enemy movements, leading her team through the thick undergrowth with practiced grace. Reaching the rival flank, they found the defenses surprisingly sparse. The opposing team had clearly committed the bulk of their strength to meeting Gareth's main push. This was their opportunity. Ilara motioned for her team to strike. They erupted from the fir trees, a whirlwind of swiftness and steel. The enemy, caught unaware, struggled to react, but they were too slow. Ilara's team moved with precision and lethal efficiency, their attacks coordinated and devastating. In mere stating moments, they had overwhelmed the remaining defenders and claimed the banner. Ilara raised it aloft, a triumphant shout escaping her throat. A roar erupted from her team, their faces alight with victory. But as she turned to face the arena, the cheers caught in her throat. Ronan stood on the platform, his features dark as a thundercloud. His eyes, like chips of obsidian, were locked on her. The pack was silent, their faces a mixture of shock and apprehension. They had witnessed Ilara defy their alpha, and then triumph. The implications were vast. Ronan vaulted from the platform, landing on the earth with a heavy impact. He stalked toward Ilara, his movements radiating raw force. The air thrummed with anticipation. He stopped before her, his gaze searing into her. Without a word, he reached out and seized her wrist, his grip unyielding as iron. Then, in one swift, brutal motion, he bared his fangs and bit down, claiming her before the entire pack. A collective intake of breath swept through the arena. Marking was a bond of the deepest kind, an oath sealed in blood and flesh. Supposed to happen in love and choosing. To do it in anger, as a public act of dominance, was beyond the pale. Ilara cried out, a sharp, involuntary sound quickly swallowed by the stunned silence. The pain was agonizing, but it paled in comparison to the humiliation. She had challenged him, and he had broken her. The bond was now forged, unwanted and inescapable. The celebratory din evaporated, leaving a stark silence as Ronan descended from the platform, his jaw a granite ledge and eyes, like polished flint, pinned Ilara. Tension vibrated in the air, a tangible pressure raising gooseflesh on her arms. He moved with a predator's economy, each stride precise, until he loomed contrash over her. "You questioned me," he rumbled, the words a low growl against her sternum. Not a query, but a decree, weighted with authority. Ilara stood firm, meeting his gaze with newfound audacity. "I offered an alternative that proved effective." "Effectiveness born of insubordination," he spat, his nostrils flaring like a warhorse. "Do you grasp the implications of challenging your alpha before the pack? Of defying my command?" "I wasn't challenging you," she countered, her voice wavering despite her resolve. "I was trying to secure victory." Ronan's hand lashed out, seizing her arm in a painful grip. A ripple of shock pulsed through the watching wolves. Ilara's breath caught. This felt wrong, alien. You will learn deference, Elara Meadowlight. He snarled, his grip tightening, threatening to bruise. You will learn the cost of disobeying your alpha. He dragged her toward the dying embers of the bonfire, their light casting elongated, grotesque shapes that danced like phantoms. The pack observed in stunned silence, their eyes wide with a morbid fascination. This wasn't pack law, not done in plain sight. Ronan pivoted, his voice amplified across the clearing, drowning out the burgeoning whispers. Elara Meadowlight has defied my authority, disregarded the established order. She will be reminded of her place within it. An icy tremor traced Elara's spine. She braced herself for what she knew, or suspected, was coming. The air thickened with expectation, saturated with the scent of pine and a metallic premonition. Her heart hammered a frantic tattoo against her ribs. Ronan's fingers bit into her flesh. She clamped down on her lip, denying him the satisfaction of a cry. His aim was to break her, to shame her. She wouldn't yield that easily. With a sudden, brutal act, he bared his fangs and pierced her neck. The pain exploded, a molten tide that engulfed her senses. A strangled cry escaped her, lost in the stifled air. The world tilted, dissolved into a swirling canvas of color and light. She felt the raw potency of his alpha blood surge through her, altering her very essence, forging a link both terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't a gentle binding, a loving union born of desire. It was an act of dominance, a brand seared in a moment of uncontrollable rage. A stigma, proclaiming both her defiance and his retribution. When he released her, Elara staggered, barely maintaining her balance. The brand on her neck pulsed, a constant reminder of his mastery and her humiliation. She lifted a trembling hand, her fingertips tracing the raw edges of the bite. Ronan recoiled, his chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes blazing with an indecipherable mix of emotions. Contrition, exultation? She couldn't discern his feelings. He had marked her, claimed her, bound her before the entire pack. The implications were colossal. The silence stretched, heavy and stifling. Then, a collective murmur swept through the pack, a wave of hushed voices and sharp intakes of breath. The same thought echoed in every mind, marked by the Alpha. In anger. Elara scanned the faces in the throng. Some reflected sympathy, their eyes clouded with pity. Others burned with envy, their expressions warped with jealousy. Some were merely voyeurs, eager to witness the unraveling drama. She felt exposed, flayed before them all. Shame seared deeper than the mark, consuming her from within. Turning from the throng, Elara bolted into the woods, the sound of her ragged gasps echoing through the quiet. She didn't know her destination, only that she needed to escape, to flee the judging gazes and the suffocating confines of the pack. She ran until her lungs burned and her muscles screamed in protest. At last, she collapsed beneath the protective canopy of an ancient oak, tears streaming freely. Mocked in fury, and now bound to him. The notion was intolerable. She rejected his bond. She spurned his protection. She wanted nothing to do with Ronan Blackwood, the Alpha who had publicly humiliated her. But the mark remained, an immutable reminder of their forced connection, and as the first tendrils of the nascent bond crept into her mind, she knew she could never truly escape him. He was now an inseparable part of her, regardless of her desires. Night descended, and the forest grew darker, more ominous. Elara huddled beneath the oak, shivering despite the protection of her fur. She was alone, branded, and utterly terrified. The future loomed, a dark and uncertain path fraught with peril. And at the end of that path, she knew, waited Ronan Blackwood, the Alpha who had claimed her in anger, and the bond that threatened to devour them both. Ronan jolted awake, the ghost of Pine and Ilara's essence clinging to him, a phantom presence at the edge of his senses. The wolf pelt beneath him, usually a grounding comfort, felt alien as he sat upright. A sheen of sweat plastered dark strands to his brow. It wasn't a dream, but a vision, sharper and more unsettling than any he'd known. He'd glimpsed Ilara, stripped bare of her usual defiance, a raw vulnerability exposed. She stood silhouetted against the churning abyss of Whispering Falls, silver hair lashing around her like grave clothes. The slump of her shoulders spoke of burdens that resonated deep within him, stirring a disquieting ache. When she turned, her normally keen eyes were pools of desolate sorrow, a silent plea that resonated to his core. He reached, compelled to offer solace, but she dissolved like river mist, leaving him alone with the fall's thunderous lament. He dragged a hand down his face, attempting to banish the lingering spectre. He was Alpha visions, especially those of her, were unacceptable. The marking had been a lesson, a necessary act of dominance. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, this raw, aching empathy persisted. He rose and strode to the window, flinging open the drapes. Dawn's nascent light painted the sky in delicate shades of rose and gold, but Ronan remained blind to the beauty. Ilara's sorrowful visage haunted his thoughts. He had to obliterate it, bury it beneath the weight of his responsibilities, the endless demands of leadership. He needed to remember the necessity of his actions. Meanwhile, in her meagerly furnished room, Ilara huddled, the thick blanket offering little respite from the bone-deep chill. It wasn't the mountain's bite. It was the frigidity of isolation, the weight of judgment. The brand on her neck throbbed, a constant, shameful reminder. Since the marking, she'd remained sequestered, acutely aware of the pack's judging eyes, the whispers that painted her as not Ilara Meadowlight, healer and strategist, but as the woman audacious enough to defy the Alpha, publicly claimed in anger, not affection. She gingerly touched the inflamed skin. A brand, a visible indictment etched onto her being. It bound her to Ronan, not in the cherished way of mates, but in a manner that felt like a violation of her very essence. She struggled to sever the connection, to reject the nascent bond being forced upon her, but to no avail. She felt him, a faint tremor beneath her skin, an inescapable awareness of his presence that bordered on torment. A hesitant knock startled her. She paused, then warily opened the door. Mara, her closest confidant, stood there, concern etched on her face. "Ilara," she murmured, "I brought food. You haven't eaten since." She trailed off, unable to voice the incident. Ilara forced a weak smile. "Thank you, Mara. I appreciate it." She stepped aside, allowing her entry. Mara placed the tray on the small table. The savory scent of stew filled the small space, yet Ilara's stomach recoiled. "How are you holding up?" Mara asked, her voice a quiet plea. Ilara shrugged, feigning indifference. "I'm fine. Just weary." Mara remained unconvinced. "The Paki, they're buzzing. Some claim you deserved it. Others they're afraid." Ilara's jaw tightened. "Let them. Their opinions hold no weight." "But—" "Ronan," Mara began, then hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "What about Ronan?" Ilara snapped, the sharpness unintended. Mara flinched slightly. He's said nothing. He's been holed up in his study all morning. Ilara scoffed, a hollow sound. Likely congratulating himself on a performance well executed. Mara reached out, gently taking Ilara's hand. Don't say that. I don't think he wanted this either. Ilara snatched her hand away. Then why did he do it, Mara? Why did he brand me? Mara offered no reply. Back in his study, Ronan paced relentlessly, the aged oak protesting under his weight. The familiar aroma of aged paper and beeswax, usually a source of comfort, only amplified the turmoil raging inside him. Ilara's sorrowful face lingered, an unwanted, persistent vision. He attempted to rationalize his actions, to convince himself they served the pack's greater good. But the truth clawed at him. He'd acted from pique, a wounded pride that had obscured the consequences. He'd exploited her, making her a public spectacle. He ceased his restless movement and confronted his reflection in the polished desk surface. Bloodshot eyes stared back from a gaunt face. He resembled a man haunted. He was Alpha Ronan Blackwood, the unwavering, decisive leader. Visions and guilt were not his burden. Control was his domain. He clenched his fists, striving to regain command of himself. Focus. The Luna trials continued. He needed to select a Luna, someone to unify the pack, to guide them through the approaching winter. He couldn't afford distraction, especially not of Ilara. Yet, even as he formed the thought, her image flared anew, sharper, more immediate. He could almost discern the texture of her skin, feel the faint warmth of her breath. A groan escaped him as he staggered back, clutching his head. What was happening? Was this the effect of the bond? This enforced connection twisting his very mind? He sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He had erred. A grievous misjudgment. He had branded Ilara in anger, and now he was imprisoned by her sorrow, by the heavy weight of his own action. He was Alpha, yes, but also a captive, ensnared by the very bond he had forged. The punishment he intended for Ilara, he was beginning to realize, had become his own torment. He had acted in anger, undeniably, but now, he was beginning to perceive the true, disquieting depths of his obsession. Whispers in the wind, the faint sting lingered, a ghostly echo of yesterday's searing brand. Ilara touched the mark on her nape, an unwanted claim. It pulsed with a subtle rhythm, ushering in an alien tide, emotions not her own. A biting regret stung her, followed by a disquieting yearning. She stumbled, riding herself against the rough bark of an oak. The forest, once a haven, now felt constricting, the rustling leaves a chorus of unspoken blame. Was this the true nature of the bond? An unending influx of Ronan's internal storms? A mind shackled, sharing its confines with the Alpha who'd seized her agency. That initial regret dissolved, replaced by surging frustration and a sensation that made her flesh prickle, a hungry possessiveness, foreign and deeply unsettling. A glimpse through Predator's eyes, seeing her as quarry, yet laced with an unwilling fascination. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, attempting to stem the intrusive current. This couldn't be the reality. Lore spoke of Luna bonds as connections of shared strength, unwavering devotion. This tasted of invasion, a trespass far deeper than the physical branding. Opening her eyes, the forest gained a hyperreal clarity, sense of pine and damp earth magnified. She was linked to Ronan, a horrifying, unwelcome tether. A guttural growl shattered her thoughts. Ilara spun to face Lyra, a she-wolf who had openly sought Ronan's favor during the trials. Her eyes were slits of resentment, her lip curled in a vicious sneer. Lyra, a warrior sculpted for battle, radiated pure antagonism. "Look at you," she hissed, each word laced with scorn. "Strutting about as if you've won some prize. You're a blight on this pack, a stain on our honor." Ilara stood firm, refusing to yield. "I didn't ask for this, Lyra. You know that." "Oh, but you lapped up the attention, didn't you?" Lyra advanced, her scent sharp with jealousy. "Playing the innocent while fluttering your lashes at the Alpha. You're a manipulative little—" "Enough," Ilara cut her off, her voice surprisingly resolute. "I defied Ronan, it's true. But I never wanted this bond. It's as much a prison for me as it is for him." Lyra scoffed, disbelieving. "Prison? Hardly. You're bonded to the Alpha. You'll wield power, influence. What could possibly be so awful?" "Power seized by force is no power at all," Ilara countered. "It's a gilded cage. And I refuse to be confined." Lyra's eyes sparked with fury. "You think you're superior to us, don't you? Too refined for the pack. But you're one of us now, like it or not. And you will learn your place." She lunged, claws extended. Ilara dodged, narrowly avoiding a lacerating strike. She was no match for Lyra's brute strength, but defiance burned within her. Evading another onslaught, she used the trees as a shield. "I don't want to fight you, Lyra," Ilara pleaded, her voice strained. "This isn't my doing. Direct your anger at Ronan, not me." Lyra ignored her, her attacks escalating. Ilara knew her defense was crumbling. As Lyra backed her against a dense thicket of thorns, a tsunami of raw anger crashed through Ilara, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. Not her own rage. Ronan's. Targeted at Lyra. The she-wolf froze, pupils dilating with sudden fear. She recoiled, her aggression evaporating. What was that?" Ilara gasped, clutching her temples. The connection intensified, solidifying, growing acute. She could feel Ronan's presence, his fury, his protection. A low growl reverberated through the woods, deeper and far more menacing than any she'd heard. The very air thrummed with power. Lyra whimpered, pivoting to flee into the forest, her tail tucked low. Ilara slumped to the ground, trembling. The surge of emotion had left her spent, adrift. She pressed her hand to the brand, attempting to decipher what had transpired. It wasn't merely a link, it was a channel. She could experience his emotions, and evidently he could perceive hers. And perhaps even mold her reality. The mark throbbed again, this time with a subtle wave of concern. Ephemeral, scarcely perceptible, yet undeniable. Ronan was worried about her. The Alpha who had humiliated her, who had imposed this bond, actually cared. The realization was deeply unsettling, a source of confusion. Was this the genesis of some worked version of Stockholm Syndrome? Or was there a deeper significance to this connection than she'd initially recognized? As twilight painted the forest in long, somber strokes, Ilara knew one truth with certainty. Her life was irrevocably altered. She was no longer simply Ilara Meadowlight, an outsider seeking acceptance. She was Ilara Meadowlight, bonded to Alpha Ronan Blackwood, a union born in defiance, yet now whispering promises of something entirely uncharted. And she needed to decipher the rules of this forced connection if she hoped to survive. The Alpha's obsession Ronan stalked through the training grounds, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. He barked orders, his voice a low rumble that echoed across the clearing, each command a calculated attempt to drown out the persistent hum of the bond. He pushed his warriors harder, demanding more, seeking exhaustion for himself, hoping to quell the unwelcome tide of Ilara that threatened to consume him. He needed to forget the feel of her skin beneath his fingers, the defiance blazing in her eyes as he'd marked her. He'd expected something else. Satisfaction, perhaps. A sense of dominance fulfilled. Instead, a swirling vortex of conflicting emotions had crashed through him, leaving him disoriented and unsettled. Now, he was left with the frustrating reality that the mark, intended as a punishment for her insolence, had become a brand on himself. Later, in the pack meeting, he sat at the head of the long oaken table, the weight of his alpha status pressing down on him. He listened to the reports on border patrols, the progress of the new recruits, the dwindling deer population. Each topic, usually absorbing, now felt like a dull drone, a pointless exercise in bureaucracy. His gaze drifted, almost against his will, to where Ilara stood near the back of the hall, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. She was a shadow, a ghost in his periphery. He found himself analyzing the way the light caught in her dark hair, the subtle curve of her jaw, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her tunic. It was infuriating. He shouldn't be noticing these things. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp and abrupt, cutting through the report on the south border skirmishes. "Jax," he said, his voice rough, "are you telling me that the rogues have crossed the border 3 times this week, and you've only managed to wound one?" Jax, a seasoned warrior with years of loyal service, stammered, "Alpha, we are doing our best. They are fast, and they know the terrain well." "Doing your best is not good enough," Ronan snapped, his patience wearing thin. He saw a flicker of resentment in Jax's eyes, quickly suppressed. Ronan knew he was being unreasonable, but he couldn't seem to control the simmering anger that bubbled beneath his skin. It was Ilara's fault. Indirectly, perhaps, but her defiance had unleashed something within him, a possessiveness he hadn't known he was capable of. The meeting dragged on, each minute an eternity. Ronan found himself interrupting more frequently, his questions sharper, his criticisms harsher. The pack members shifted uneasily, sensing the Alpha's volatile mood. Even his most trusted advisors, Liam and Maeve, exchanged worried glances. "The grain stores are lower than anticipated," Maeve reported, her voice calm and measured. "We need to increase the hunting quotas." "Then increase them," Ronan said dismissively, his gaze flicking back to Ilara. She hadn't moved, hadn't even looked in his direction. It irritated him further. Was she deliberately ignoring him? Testing him? Liam stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Ronan, perhaps we should consider trading with the Rivermoon Pack. They have an abundance of grain, and we could offer them lumber in exchange." "No," Ronan said, his voice flat. "We will not beg for scraps from the Rivermoon Pack." He knew the trade was logical, practical even, but the thought of relying on another pack, especially one led by Alpha Theron, a man he'd always considered a rival, was intolerable. "But, Ronan," Liam persisted, "the pack's well-being is at stake." "I have made my decision," Ronan growled, his eyes flashing. "That is all." The meeting ended abruptly, leaving a palpable tension in the air. The pack members dispersed quickly, avoiding eye contact with the Alpha. Ronan remained seated, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of his chair. He felt the weight of their disappointment, their disapproval. He was failing them, and it was all because of her. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone floor. He needed to get out, to run, to escape the suffocating confines of the pack house. He shifted into his wolf form, the change a small release, a temporary respite from the turmoil within. He burst out of the building and into the forest, his paws pounding against the earth. He ran for hours, driven by a primal need to escape, to outrun the bond. He chased deer, tore through underbrush, and howled at the moon, his voice a mournful cry of frustration and longing. But no matter how far he ran, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the pull, the invisible tether that connected him to Ilara. He could feel her presence, a faint warmth in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of his mistake. As dawn approached, he slowed, his body exhausted, his spirit weary. He shifted back into his human form, his clothes torn and muddy, his hair tangled. He stood at the edge of the forest, looking back towards the packlands. He knew he couldn't stay away. He was the Alpha, and his responsibilities were to his pack. But more than that, he knew he couldn't stay away from her. He started walking, his steps heavy, his heart filled with a mixture of dread and anticipation. He was drawn to her, compelled by a force he couldn't understand, a force that threatened to consume him. He knew, with a growing sense of certainty, that his life would never be the same. Ilara had become his obsession, a dark and dangerous addiction that he couldn't escape. Rogue shadows the howl ripped through the night, primal and laced with a hunger that wasn't the pack's own. It shattered the fragile peace that had settled over Blackwood territory since the marking. Ronan's head snapped up, his senses instantly on high alert. He was in his study, attempting to bury himself in pack ledgers, a futile effort to distract himself from the constant thrum of Ilara's presence in the back of his mind. Now, the rogue's howl was a welcome distraction. He was already shifting as he burst through the door, the change a violent surge of power. His beta, Liam, met him in the courtyard, his face grim. Rogues, Alpha. A large pack, moving fast. They're after the northern border. Ronan snarled, the sound guttural. How many? At least 20, maybe more. They're not just scouting, they're hunting. Liam's eyes darted towards the pack house. The women. Ronan's jaw tightened. The Luna trials had attracted more than just potential mates, it had drawn unwanted attention. He cursed under his breath. Get the warriors ready. I want a perimeter established immediately. And get the women to the safe room. The courtyard erupted with activity. Warriors shifted, their bodies rippling with muscle, eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. But amidst the organized chaos, Ronan caught a flicker of movement near the edges of the crowd. Ilara. She stood slightly apart, her face pale but resolute. She wasn't trying to flee towards the pack house, as the other women were being herded. Instead, she seemed to be assessing the situation, her gaze sharp and intelligent as she scanned the surrounding woods. Ronan strode towards her, his voice a low growl. Ilara, get inside. Now. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at him. They'll break through the perimeter, Ronan. There are too many, too fast. That's not your concern. Your concern is your safety. He reached for her arm, intending to physically guide her towards the pack house, but she sidestepped him with surprising agility. And what about the safety of the others? Her voice was calm, but there was steel in her eyes. Are you just going to let them be slaughtered? I have warriors to protect them. Your place is inside, where you'll be safe. Safe? She laughed, a short, bitter sound. There's no such thing as safe, Ronan. Not anymore. Her gaze flickered to his mark on her neck, a silent accusation. Before Ronan could respond, another howl echoed through the trees, closer this time, laced with a bloodthirsty eagerness. The rogues were closing in. Ronan cursed. He didn't have time for this. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "I'm not going to argue with you, Ilara. Get inside." But as he pulled her towards the pack house, he saw it. A flicker of movement in the trees. A rogue breaking through the hastily formed perimeter, heading straight for a group of younger pack members who were struggling to shift. Without thinking, Ilara wrenched her arm free and moved. She was a blur of motion, faster than Ronan would have thought possible. She intercepted the rogue just as it was about to pounce, slamming into it with a force that sent them both crashing to the ground. Ronan froze, his mind reeling. Ilara? Fighting? He had assumed he hadn't considered she would know how to fight. The rogue, momentarily stunned, scrambled to its feet. It was huge, easily twice Ilara's size in her human form, its eyes burning with a feral rage. It lunged at her, claws extended. Ilara rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. She was quick, agile, but she was no match for the rogue's raw power. It swiped at her again, and this time, its claws connected, tearing through her jacket and leaving a bloody gash on her arm. Ronan roared, shifting fully. He launched himself at the rogue, knocking it away from Ilara. The two wolves clashed, a whirlwind of fur and teeth. Ronan was stronger, faster, more skilled, but the rogue was relentless, driven by a desperate hunger. As Ronan fought, he was acutely aware of Ilara behind him. She was still on her feet, her face pale but determined. She tore a strip of cloth from her shirt and wrapped it tightly around her wounded arm. Then, she picked up a fallen branch, its end sharpened to a point. Ronan didn't want her fighting. He wanted her safe, protected. But he also knew that he couldn't protect her if she refused to be protected. And he couldn't deny the surge of something that ran through him as he watched her stand her ground, ready to fight. The rogue pack was upon them now, a snarling, ravenous horde. The Blackwood warriors fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. The air was thick with the scent of blood and fur, the sounds of growls and snarls echoing through the trees. Ronan found himself back to back with Ilara, the heat of her body a strange comfort against his fur. He snapped and snarled, tearing into any rogue that dared to come close. But they kept coming, wave after wave of snarling teeth and slashing claws. He heard Ilara grunt behind him, a sharp intake of breath. He risked a glance and saw that she had been knocked to the ground. A rogue, looming over her, its teeth bared. Rage exploded within him, a primal fury that eclipsed all reason. He ripped the rogue from Ilara, tearing into its throat with savage abandon. He didn't stop until it was lifeless, its blood staining his fur. He turned back to Ilara, his eyes searching her for injuries. "Are you all right?" She nodded, her face streaked with dirt and blood. "I'm fine. Just as surprised." "Surprised? I didn't know I could do that." She looked down at the makeshift spear in her hand, her expression thoughtful. I guess I'm more like my mother than I thought." Ronan didn't have time to ask what she meant. Another rogue was attacking, and then another, and another. They fought together, a brutal, desperate dance of survival. Ronan with his raw power and honed skill. Ilara with her surprising agility and fierce determination. As they fought, Ronan felt something shift within him. It wasn't just the bond, the unwanted connection that had been forged in anger. It was something else, something deeper. He saw Ilara not as a punishment, not as a burden, but as a warrior, a survivor. And he felt a grudging respect, a flicker of admiration. They fought until the last rogue was driven back, their bodies aching, their muscles burning. The air was thick with the smell of blood and death. The Blackwood warriors were victorious, but they had paid a heavy price. As the pack began to tend to their wounded, Ronan turned to Ilara. She was leaning against a tree, her face pale, her arm still bleeding. He knelt beside her, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you," he said, the words rough. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Don't thank me, Ronan. I didn't do it for you." "Then who did you do it for?" She looked away, her gaze fixed on the fallen bodies of the rogues. "I did it for them," she said softly. "For the ones who couldn't protect themselves." Ronan stared at her, his mind reeling. He had marked her in anger, intending to punish her, to humiliate her. But instead, he had unleashed something he didn't understand, something powerful and dangerous. And he had a feeling that this was just the beginning. The bond was more than unwanted, it was changing them. Blurred lines the air reeked, a nauseating mix of blood and singed hair, a grim echo of the recent clash. Ilara, sleeves hitched up her forearms, knelt beside a young she-wolf, her leg bent at a grotesque angle. A whimper escaped the girl's lips, her eyes wide with agony, as Ilara offered soothing murmurs and gently palpated the injury. Her own body ached, a patchwork of discoloration blooming beneath her skin, hard-won souvenirs from the brutal skirmish against the rogues. Yet, the physical discomfort paled compared to the tempest raging within her mind. Ronan. The lethal ballet of his fighting style. The feral growl that tore from him when a rogue encroached too close to her. And that fleeting, unguarded glimpse in his gaze, a mystery she couldn't decipher before the Alpha's mask snapped back into place. "Easy," she crooned, subtly adjusting the she-wolf's leg. A sharp gasp was the only prelude before the girl slipped into unconsciousness. Swiftly, Ilara secured the leg with a makeshift splint cobbled together from branches and ripped fabric, her movements precise and ingrained. Experience had taught her to act swiftly in the face of injury, healer or not. A shadow fell upon her, and Ilara glanced up to find Ronan looming, his expression severe, his eyes assessing the wounded with detached scrutiny. Still streaked with grime and blood, his dark hair clinging to his forehead, he nevertheless exuded raw power. "She'll recover," Ilara stated, her tone even. "She only requires rest." Ronan's gaze flickered to her face, lingering before hardening. "You should also be resting. You defied a direct order. And had I obeyed, how many more of your pack would be lying here in death?" Ilara shot back, unable to hold her tongue. "You were preoccupied, Ronan. You needed support." His jaw clenched. "I require no assistance." "Perhaps not," she conceded, "but your pack does, and whether it pleases you or not, I am now a part of it." The words hung in the air, weighted with unspoken truths. The forced union, the resentment, the undeniable current that pulsed between them, a dissonant chord struck on the strings of animosity, and something that bordered dangerously on attraction. He advanced, his presence suddenly overwhelming her senses. The aroma of pine and ozone emanated from him, a potent distillation of his volatile nature. "Do not presume to comprehend my pack, Ilara." "Nor me." "Then, perhaps, you should attempt an explanation," she countered, her voice barely audible. "Instead of retreating behind your alpha facade." He fixed her with a prolonged, silent stare, his expression inscrutable. Then, without a word, he pivoted and stalked away. Melting into the crowd of wolves tending to the injured, Ilara watched him depart, a knot of exasperation tightening in her chest. He was impossible, arrogant, exasperating, and still she shook her head, attempting to banish the thought. There was no space for still in this equation. He had marked her in anger, branded her against her consent. Any emotions she experienced were merely a byproduct of the bond, a distorted echo of his own possessiveness. As the night deepened, the wounded were transported to the pack house, the atmosphere thick with the scent of curative herbs and the hushed murmur of anxious voices. Elara gravitated towards the infirmary, providing assistance where she could, changing dressings, fetching water, offering a comforting word. The pack members, initially wary, appeared to soften as they observed her tireless dedication. A few even offered tentative smiles, a silent acknowledgement of her contribution. Later, as the first streaks of dawn painted the sky, Elara stole away from the pack house, seeking solace in the forest's embrace. She discovered a secluded glade near a babbling brook, the air invigoratingly cool against her skin. Settling onto a moss-laden rock, she closed her eyes and allowed the chorus of nature to envelop her, striving for a measure of serenity. The battle had been a maelstrom of adrenaline and instinct, a desperate struggle for survival. Yet, amidst the chaos, something had altered. She had glimpsed the vulnerability masked beneath Ronan's carefully constructed exterior, a flicker of the man he might have been, the man he could be. And she had felt a surge of protectiveness, an intense yearning to shield him from the weight of his leadership, from the darkness that seemed to envelop him like a shroud. But that was foolish. She knew he was the Alpha. He did not require her protection. He required what? She could not say, and she was uncertain she desired to discover the truth. Meanwhile, Ronan stood on the pack house balcony, watching the sunrise paint the horizon. He could detect Elara's presence, the subtle fragrance of wildflowers clinging to the air, a persistent reminder of her proximity. He had been acutely aware of her during the battle, a sharp pang of concern every time she moved, every time she was in peril. The bond, intended as a punishment, had morphed into a torment, a constant intrusion on his senses. He had marked her in fury, a reckless act fueled by defiance and a primal urge to assert control. He had never intended for it to persist, but it had. It remained, a persistent thrum beneath his skin, an unbreakable connection. He had witnessed her fight, her movements lithe and forceful, her eyes blazing with unwavering resolve. She was not the delicate human he had initially assumed. She was a warrior, a survivor, and she had saved lives, including his own. He clenched his fists, suppressing the impulse to seek her out, to draw her into his embrace and claim her as his own. But he could not. He would not. The bond was a fabrication, born of animosity and compulsion. It was not genuine. It could not be. He had to discover a way to sever it, to liberate them both from this unwanted tie. Yet, the prospect filled him with a chilling dread, a sensation of loss he could not rationalize. He was the Alpha. He was in command. He had to be, even if it entailed denying the undeniable pull that drew him to Elara, even if it meant shattering the fragile connection that had blossomed between them in the crucible of battle. The lines had blurred, dangerously, and Ronan knew, with an encroaching sense of trepidation, that the true battle had only just commenced. Whispers of treachery, the air in the war room felt suffocating, thick with unspoken dread. Around the scarred mahogany table sat Ronan's inner circle. Liam, his beta, a mountain of a man whose devotion was carved deep into his weathered face. Maeve, the pack strategist, her incisive mind and sharper tongue, often the bearer of unwelcome truths. And Gareth, the elder, whose wisdom usually flowed with a soothing, grandfatherly current, though not tonight. Tonight, worry etched deep trenches in his brow. Ronan, Liam rumbled, his voice a low, resonant growl. The pack. They're on edge. Ronan leaned back, the leather chair groaning in protest. His gaze met Liam's, unwavering. On edge about what, Liam? The rogue skirmish? We handled that decisively. It's more than that, Maeve cut in, her voice like honed steel. They're uneasy about you. About Ilara. The name lingered, almost solid. Irritation sparked within Ronan. Swiftly quelled. Ilara is a pack member. She proved her mettle in the fighting. She's become more than that, Ronan, and you're aware of it, Gareth murmured, his eyes holding a weariness that seemed to compress years onto his face. The marking it was born of rage. It lacked justification. The pack recognizes that. They're murmuring their discontent. Ronan's jaw clenched. Murmurs? Let them murmur. I am the Alpha. My decisions require no validation, but they invite evaluation. Maeve countered, a warning note threading through her tone. And currently, they observe an Alpha distracted, consumed. Even. The word struck like a physical blow. Ronan's grip on the chair arms tightened until his knuckles shone white. Consumed? Ridiculous. Is it? Liam countered, his stare unwavering. You haunt the healing ward, a silent sentinel. You dismissed the border patrols yesterday, following her ghost on the wind. You nearly ripped Finn limb from limb when he inadvertently brushed against her in the training grounds. Ronan's silence served as affirmation. Damn them, they were right. He felt the tether, the constant awareness of Ilara's presence, an electric current thrumming just beneath the surface. He detested the feeling. He resented it. He couldn't shake it. The Shadow Claw pack is exploiting this against us. Maeve pressed on, her voice grim. Their Alpha, Kale, is fanning the flames, claiming you're weakened, but the forced marking has destabilized you, made you vulnerable. He asserts you've lost control, incapable of leading. Kale, Ronan. Ronan, hissed. The name of Viper's strike. He presumes too much. He does more than presume, Gareth stated, his voice regaining its former strength. He gathers his forces, he smells weakness and seeks to claim our territory. Ronan surged to his feet, the chair screeching against the floorboards. Then we will demonstrate the price of underestimating Blackwood. We will obliterate him. With all due respect, Ronan, Liam interjected, his voice a steady anchor. We require more than raw power. We need composure. We must demonstrate to the pack and to our enemies that you are in command, that the marking of Ilara was a strategic act, not a lapse in judgment, not turned away, pacing the confined space. He understood their unspoken plea. He had to publicly distance himself from Ilara. He had to reinforce his dominance. He had to sever the connection, or at least give that impression. The thought sent a frigid wave through him, a chilling premonition of desolate isolation. Across the border, within the heart of Shadowclaw territory, Alpha Kale scrutinized the roughly drawn map spread across the makeshift table. Rain hammered against the canvas tent, mirroring the tempest raging within him. His beta, a brutish wall of muscle named Gregor, stood beside him, as did his cunning strategist Lyra, her eyes glinting with ambition. Blackwood is fracturing, Lyra hissed, her voice like wind through dry reeds. The forced marking it's poisoning him from within. His focus is shattered. His pack is losing trust. Excellent, excellent, Kale snarled, his fist clenching. He believed he could intimidate us. steal our hunting grounds. Now, retribution awaits. His beta remains loyal, Gregor grumbled, his brow furrowed in concern. And his warriors are formidable. Victory will not be easily attained. Ease is for the spineless, Kale spat. We'll leverage his weakness. We will strike when he is most exposed. We will seize what rightfully belongs to us. He stabbed a point on the map, a vulnerable section of the Blackwood territory. Here, we launch a diversionary attack, drawing their strength away from the core. While they scramble, we strike at the heart at Blackwood himself. Lyra nodded, her eyes gleaming with avarice. And the marked female? Ilara, isn't it? She could be a valuable pawn. Kale hesitated, a flicker of something akin to darkness in his eyes. No, Ilara is Blackwood's downfall. We will exploit that weakness, but we will not touch her. She is his affliction. Let him writhe beneath it. Back within Blackwood lands, whispers snaked through the pack house like insidious vines. Servants exchanged furtive glances in the kitchens. Warriors murmured amongst themselves in the training yard. Even the children seemed to absorb the anxiety, their playful shouts muted, replaced by anxious glances. Did you see his haunting of the healing ward yesterday? One servant confided, eyes wide with apprehension. He looked at her like she was his last meal. They say sleep evades him, a warrior muttered to his comrade as they honed their weapons. He haunts the forest all night, driven mad by the bond. Our Alpha was once a titan, an elder lamented, shaking his head. Now he is a spectral shadow. This Ilara, she has broken him. Oblivious to the gathering storm, Ilara tended to a young wolf pup, injured during training. She felt the weight of scrutiny, the subtle animosity that permeated the air. She was an outsider, unwanted. But she refused to cower. She would prove her worth, not to Ronan, but to her own soul. Finishing the bandage, she saw Ronan standing in the doorway of the healing ward. His face was a battleground of emotions. Wrath, yearning, and an enigma she couldn't decipher. He held her gaze for a heartbeat, and she glimpsed a sliver of vulnerability, the man beneath the Alpha's iron mask. Then, as swiftly as it appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold command. He turned and departed, leaving Ilara alone, the whispers of treachery swirling around her like a coming tempest. The price of duty, Ronan stood at the perimeter of the training grounds, the earthy aroma of damp soil and evergreens doing little to quell the tempest inside him. The pack's unease was palpable, evident in their averted gazes, conversations abruptly stifled at his approach. Kale's challenge resonated in the air. Emboldened by Ronan's perceived failing his fixation on Ilara, his gloved hands tightened into fists, the leather groaning under the strain. Fixation. The word left a bitter taste. He had to shield his people, his pack, from the encroaching storm, and that demanded protecting Ilara even from his own impulses. He pivoted, heading back toward the pack house, each stride determined despite the gnawing ache in his chest. He knew the course he must take, though it threatened to shatter him. He had to create distance. He needed Ilara to understand that their bond, however initiated, held no true significance. Only then could she be shielded from the brewing political coal. Machinations. From becoming a pawn in Kale's cruel game. He found her in the library, bathed in sunlight that streamed through the expansive windows, illuminating dancing particles of dust. She was absorbed in a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. He lingered in the doorway, observing her, committing to memory the delicate curve of her jaw, the subtle movement of her lips as she deciphered the words on the page. These snatched moments, seared into his mind, would have to suffice. He cleared his throat, the sound a stark intrusion in the hushed space. Ilara glanced up, her eyes widening slightly as their gazes met. He steeled himself, adopting a neutral, detached facade. "Ilara," he stated, his voice devoid of all warmth, "I require a word." She marked her place and set the book down, curiosity evident in her expression. "What is it, Ronan?" He advanced into the room, carefully maintaining a buffer between them, the bandits fostering discord within the pack. They perceive it as a liability, a sign of weakness. He scrutinized her face, searching for any hint of comprehension, of acquiescence. A fleeting shadow of hurt flickered across her features, quickly masked by her customary defiance. "And what do you see it as, Ronan?" He hesitated, the unvarnished truth a searing coal lodged in his throat. It was a truth he could not voice. He couldn't acknowledge that the coerced link had evolved into something deeper, something craved, something that threatened to consume him whole. "An error," he declared, the word a corrosive falsehood against his very being. "An error that requires correction." Her eyes narrowed, her jaw clenching. "Correction? In what manner?" "By demonstrating its irrelevance," he replied, his voice frigid and remote. "By proving to the pack it holds no sway over me." He watched understanding dawn in her eyes, the dawning awareness of the request he was making, or rather, the demand he was levying. "You wish to feign its non-existence," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "I wish to secure the pack's well-being," he countered, his tone sharper than intended. "Yours included." She scoffed, a brittle sound that echoed in the otherwise silent room. "My well-being? Or your dominion?" He flinched, the accusation hitting far too close to the truth. He averted his gaze, unable to meet her penetrating stare. "It's for the best, Ilara. Please, have faith in me on this." "Trust you?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You claimed me against my volition, Ronan. You imposed a bond I never sought. And now you expect my trust?" He offered only silence, his back to her, his shoulders taut. He knew he was unworthy of her trust. He had seized it, pilfered it, desecrated it. But he couldn't afford to dwell on that now, not if he was to safeguard her. "Very well," she conceded, her voice tight with contained emotion. "I comprehend. You want me to participate in this charade, to pretend that none of this transpired." He spun back to face her, relief mingling with guilt in his chest. "Thank you, Ilara." "Offer no gratitude," she retorted, her eyes blazing with indignation. "I undertake this for myself, because I refuse to be controlled by you. I refuse to be defined by your actions." He nodded, acknowledging her defiance. It was a quality he both admired and resented. "Understood." He turned to depart, but she halted him with one final query. "Ronan," she began, her voice now softer, almost hesitant. "Why?" He paused, his hand gripping the doorframe. He yearned to unburden himself, to confess his blossoming affections, to implore her forgiveness. But he couldn't. He wouldn't risk revealing his weakness, not when the pack stood on the péché, precipice of chaos. "Duty," he stated, the word a leaden burden upon his tongue. "My duty lies in safeguarding the pack." He exited the library, leaving Ilara standing alone in the sunlit space. He could feel her gaze boring into his back, like a brand being seared into his flesh. He knew he had wounded her, perhaps beyond repair. but he also believed he had acted as he had to, or at least as he felt compelled to act. The following days were a harrowing exercise in self-suppression. Ronan circumvented Ilara, meticulously structuring his schedule to avoid any chance encounters. Meals were taken in his study, pack meetings were attended solo, and his nights were spent patrolling the territory, pushing himself to the very brink of exhaustion. He would occasionally catch a glimpse of her in the distance, a fleeting flash of her auburn hair, the echo of her laughter carried on the breeze. Each instant sent a painful shard of longing through his heart, a stark reminder of the sacrifice he had made. He noted the changes within her as well. The sparkle in her eyes seemed diminished, her laughter less frequent. She carried herself with a quiet poise, a stoic acceptance of her destiny. But he could discern the underlying hurt, the vulnerability she so diligently sought to conceal. The pack, too, observed this shift. They witnessed Ronan's coldness towards Ilara, his detachment, and exhaled a collective sigh of relief. The tension dissipated, the whispers receded. They believed their alpha had regained control, that the threat had been neutralized. But Ronan knew better. Control was an illusion. He was merely performing a role. And the cost of his duty was a gradual, agonizing torment. He was losing Ilara, not to Kale, but to his own self-imposed restraint, and he wasn't sure he possessed the strength to endure it. Confrontation, the air above the training grounds thrummed, charged with unspoken challenges. Ronan, a silent sentinel at the circle's edge, scrutinized the women vying for selection in the Luna trials. Though he feigned interest in the beta female's awkward attempts at sparring, his gaze repeatedly snagged on Ilara. The delicate aroma of her lavender soap, a foreign sweetness amid the pack's raw, wild tang, tugged at their bond, a fierce pull behind his breastbone that he fought to ignore. He gritted his teeth, wrenching his attention away, desperately projecting a nonchalance that belied the turmoil within. Ilara, radiating her own simmering frustration, registered every nuance of his avoidance. The past days had relegated her to the periphery, a mere observer of their insular society. Each perfunctory greeting, each courteous but distant smile, felt like a fresh abrasion on the wound Ronan had inflicted. Enough! Completing her kata, each movement a precise, almost violent expression of caged energy, she defied the curious stares and marched toward him. "We need to talk," she declared, her voice a low, resonant thread cutting through the clamor. Surprise and a flicker of annoyance tightened Ronan's features. Now is not a good time, Ilara. The Alpha's decree, meant to silence dissent. It's long past time, Ronan, she countered, emerald fire blazing in her eyes. I refuse to be dismissed like a bothersome whelp. We're going to talk, and we're doing it now. She gestured toward the thick woods fringing the clearing. Somewhere private. He hesitated, noting the watchful eyes of the pack. But her stance spoke of unshakable resolve, her gaze a burning brand. Argument would only amplify the drama. A sharp nod was his surrender. He pivoted and moved toward the trees, Ilara a determined shadow. Within the woods, a temporary haven, the density of the leaves muffled the sounds of their world. Yet, the space between them crackled, a palpable tension woven with words left unsaid and emotions denied. Reaching a small clearing, Ronan turned, his face a mask of guarded composure. "What do you want, Ilara?" The words were clipped, precise. "The truth," she stated, unwavering. "I want you to drop the charade. Stop pretending this connection is some trivial error. Stop pretending you don't feel anything. Stop acting as if I mean nothing to you." Ronan recoiled as if physically struck. "I am doing what I must for the good of the pack, good or convenient. Alara scoffed, closing the space between them. Is it essential to break me, to diminish yourself, to embrace a lie? Does the pack feel your inadequacy, or do they feel your falseness? You fail to understand the burdens I bear, Ronan bit out, fists clenching. The pack is ever watchful for weakness, for grounds to challenge my authority. This bondage presents complications. Complications? Ilara echoed, incredulous. It's more than an inconvenience, Ronan. It's a lifeline, a visceral, undeniable link between our souls. You knew this when you marked me, and you know it now. Don't insult my intelligence with this pretense. I made a mistake, Ronan conceded, the words resonating with emptiness. I acted in fury, and I regret it. Her eyes narrowed, sharp as shards of glass. You regret marking me, or the fallout. Do you regret that you cannot dictate your feelings for me? Stepping closer, invading his space, she dropped her voice to a silken threat. Because I don't buy it, Ronan. I see the way you look at me, the possessive intensity, the fleeting longing when you think I am not looking. You can deny it all you wish, but your wolf knows the truth. He turned away, avoiding her piercing gaze, running a hand roughly through his dark hair, the gesture a display of his raw frustration. This isn't about my desires, Ilara. It's about the welfare of the pack. What about my welfare? Her voice rose. Am I just a token in your power games, a sacrifice to secure your position? Do I have no agency over my life, my happiness? I am trying to safeguard you, Ronan insisted, his voice strained to the point of cracking crash. Can't you see? If the pack perceives me as weakened through this connection, you become a target. They will exploit you against me. So, your solution is to cast me aside, to feign indifference? Ilara challenged. That's not protection, Ronan. That's rank cowardice. The word hung suspended, a heavy accusation. Ronan's head snapped up, anger flaring in his eyes. Do not presume to call me a coward. Then prove me wrong, she retorted, her voice trembling, raw with emotion. Acknowledge our bond, admit your feelings. Show the pack that you are not ashamed of me, that you value me. Ronan met her gaze, his expression a fierce conflict of emotions. He saw the exposed vulnerability in her eyes, the desperate plea for acceptance, for honesty. He yearned to reach out, to pull her into his embrace, to whisper the words she longed to hear. But he was paralyzed. The weight of his mantle, the fear of endangering his pack, held him captive. I cannot, he rasped, barely audible. Ilara recoiled as if struck. The fire in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by a profound disappointment. I see, she said, her voice muted. So, this is it? You're prepared to forfeit everything, even our connection, in the name of your authority? It's not about authority, Ronan countered, his voice laced with desperation. It's about responsibility. It's about safeguarding the pack. And what about safeguarding me from your fabrications? Ilara pressed. From this constant pantomime? From the realization that you are willing to discard me to preserve yourself? Ronan remained mute, unable to voice a response. Ilara shook her head, a solitary tear etching a clean path down her cheek. I believed there was something authentic between us, Ronan. Something worthy of fighting for. But I was mistaken. You are so consumed by duty, by trepidation, that you have lost sight of all else. She turned and walked away, her shoulders bowed, her steps heavy with disillusionment. Ronan watched her retreat, his heart clenched with a pain he could no longer deny. He knew he was losing her, that his decisions were forcing her away. Yet, He remained rooted to the spot. He was caught, a prisoner of his own making, sacrificing his own joy for what he perceived to be the greater good. But standing alone in the silent clearing, surrounded by the impassive trees, he could not shake the feeling that he was committing the gravest error of his life. The lingering fragrance of her lavender soap haunted the air, a persistent reminder of what he was relinquishing, of the woman he was pushing away. He closed his eyes, the image of her tear-streaked face searing itself into his memory. He was Alpha Ronan Blackwood, leader of his pack, but in that moment he felt utterly helpless. Confessions in the moonlight. The moon, a cold orb in the velvet abyss, silvered the training field. Ilara, arms folded tight, fought to contain the inferno that still blazed within, the cool air offering scant relief. She'd craved isolation, a space to mend her fractured spirit, but the whisper of foliage betrayed the unwelcome approach of the one man she yearned to avoid. "Ilara," Ronan murmured, his voice a deep-timbered resonance that once ignited her core. Tonight, it only deepened the ache in her soul. She pivoted, masking her turmoil with a carefully blank stare. "What is it, Ronan?" He emerged into the lunar glow, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions she struggled to interpret. Shadow and light played across his strong features, projecting both command and vulnerability. "I needed to speak with you. Is. Haven't we exhausted the subject? You chose your pack. You chose obligation. You chose everything but me." The word sliced sharper than intended, tinged with a bitterness that surprised even Burr. Ronan winced, as if physically struck. "That's not entirely accurate." He hesitated, his gaze darting away, then locking with hers, a tempest gathering behind his eyes. "I erred, Ilara. Severely." "An error?" A laugh escaped her, hollow and devoid of joy. "Branding me before the entire pack was an error. Rejection wasn't sufficient. You needed to humiliate me first." "No." "You're twisting my meaning. The marking it stemmed from a place of anger, of frustration. But it unlocked something unexpected within me, Ilara." He advanced, his hand extending, then snapping back as if scorched. "I tried to disregard it, to bury it beneath the weight of my duties, but I find I can't." Ilara's pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a stark counterpoint to the night's stillness. "What are you implying, Ronan?" He halted a few feet away, the distance feeling both immense and claustrophobic. The scent of pine and damp earth clung to him, a raw, earthy fragrance that both repelled and drew her in. "I'm confessing that I harbor feelings for you, Ilara. Genuine feelings." The marking IT simply magnified a truth that was already present, simmering beneath the surface. "I was too blind, too headstrong to acknowledge it." Her breath caught. This couldn't be unfolding. Not after the devastation. "Stop." She raised a hand, a preemptive defense. "Don't do this, Ronan. Don't attempt to rewrite what's happened. You made your decision. You clarified my position beneath pack, beneath duty. I know, and I lament it, every solitary moment of it." He closed the space between them, his voice a ragged whisper. "I was wrong, Ilara, profoundly wrong, and I'm now reaping the consequences." "Reaping the consequences?" She scoffed, the sound brittle. "You're the Alpha, Ronan. You command power, respect, the undying loyalty of your pack. What price are you truly paying? The agony of knowing I wounded you, the dread of nearly losing you, the realization that all I once coveted, it's all hollow without you. He reached out again, this time capturing her hand, his fingers meshing with hers. His touch sent a current of electricity through her, a searing reminder of the bond that persisted between them. Ilara fixated on their joined hands, her mind whirling. Was this authentic? Could she dare to believe him? He'd inflicted such profound pain, shattered her trust beyond repair. How could she ever risk such vulnerability again? Why voice this now, Ronan? What compels you to tell me this now? Is it merely the bond driving you to distraction? Is it the unbearable thought of me with another? His grip tightened. It transcends that, Ilara, far beyond. The bond it serves as a perpetual reminder of my failing, yes. Yet, it also unveiled what I'd been missing. It illuminated your strength, your compassion, your unwavering spirit. It revealed the woman I was too obtuse to value. She scrutinized his gaze, seeking truth among potential falsehoods. She yearned to have faith, desperately. But apprehension held her hostage, whispering insidious doubts in her ear. And what of the pack, Ronan? What of your obligations? Have those magically vanished? Would you forsake all you uphold, purely for me? He faltered, and in that hesitation, Ilara discerned her answer. He remained unchanged. Not truly. He was still caught between his duty and his desires, still struggling to reconcile his responsibilities with his affections for her. I don't know, he confessed, his tone thick with anguish. I lack all the solutions, Ilara. I simply know I can't surrender you. I refuse to. Ilara wrenched her hand free, the sudden absence of contact sending a tremor through her. You already have, Ronan. You relinquished me the instant you prioritized your pack over me, and I'm uncertain if I can ever absolve you for that. A wave of agony contorted his features, a raw, visceral display of regret. Grant me a chance, Ilara. I implore you. Allow me to demonstrate that I've evolved, that I'm prepared to fight for you, for us. She regarded him, genuinely observed him, and recognized the authentic torment in his eyes. A flicker of hope sparked within her, a fragile ember in the encompassing darkness. But it was rapidly snuffed out by the harsh reality of their circumstances. I don't know, Ronan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her temple, his touch igniting a familiar warmth within her. That's all I'm asking, Ilara. Just don't shut the door completely. She offered no reply, incapable of formulating one. The weight of his words, the burden of her own conflicted emotions, was too crushing to bear. She merely remained there, bathed in moonlight, her heart a battleground of devotion and resentment. Ronan retreated, respecting her need for silence. He understood he faced a formidable journey to regain her trust, to validate his sincerity. But he was prepared to undertake whatever measures necessary. He had to, because the mere prospect of losing her, it was a torment he could not possibly endure. He turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ilara alone with her musings, her uncertainties, and the faint, lingering trace of his scent on the night breeze. The moon seemed to taunt her, its silvery illumination exposing the tangled threads of their complex, impossible affection. And as she stood there, beneath the vigilant gaze of the silent moon, Ilara knew her path was far from resolved. Storm clouds gathered, the tremor felt unnatural. Ilara registered it first, a faint thrumming through the soles of her feet as she crossed the training grounds. The pine-infused air, heavy with the scent of turned earth, sharpened with a metallic tang. Ronan, mid-shout at sparring pups, froze, head tilted, nostrils testing the wind. The playful clamor of trainees evaporated, replaced by taut silence. "What is it?" Alara breathed, barely audible, yet Ronan heard. His gaze, normally steel-gray, now mirrored a bruised sky. "Strangers," he rumbled, the word a raw snarl that prickled Ilara's skin. "They've violated the border. Not for peace." A drawn-out, keening howl ripped through the stillness, answered by another and another, each echo nearer. The alarm. The long-dreaded attack had broken upon them. Ronan unleashed a string of commands, his voice amplified by alpha power. The trainees, momentarily forgetting fear, stiffened to attention, metamorphosing into disciplined soldiers. "Liam, take half the guard to the southern edge, reinforce the line. Mara, evacuate the elders and pups to the caverns. Move, Ilara," he stated, pinning her with his gaze. "Stay. Here." His words were clipped, devoid of the tenderness he'd shown only days prior. This was Alpha Ronan, the shield of his pack, not the moonlit lover. "What do you need me to do?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Your senses are unmatched. Be my eyes, my ears. Report anything aberrant." He seized a roughly drawn map etched into bark, spreading it on a nearby table. "Their primary target is the stronghold, an attempt to decapitate us swiftly. But their true objective is the Luna, that's you." He locked gazes with her, inscrutable. Was there a ghost of regret there, or simply the play of Tayav? "Torchlight?" Chaos erupted within the pack house. Warriors snatched up weapons, faces grim masks. Women, ordinarily occupied with domestic tasks, now fastened crude armor and honed blades. The aroma of dread mingled with the keen tang of adrenaline, creating a potent, volatile miasma. Ronan moved with contained ferocity, his very presence a tide of power. He addressed the assembled warriors, his voice a clarion call. "They come to seize what is ours, our land, our home, our liberty. We will not yield an inch. We will not break. We will meet them with the full force of our being. We will show them the strength of the strength of the string. Blackwood Pack!" A defiant roar ripped from the warriors, rattling the structure itself. Ilara stood beside Ronan, her fear receding, supplanted by a rush of combat readiness. She wasn't a trained fighter, but she refused to stand idly by while her haven was threatened. "They approach from the west, Alpha," Ilara declared, her voice ringing clear. "I scent their terror." And something else, a sharp, iron odor. Bloodlust. Ronan nodded grimly. "They crave a reckoning. Let us provide one they will never forget." He addressed a burly wolf, scarred and formidable. "Torin, lead your squad to intercept them at the western ridge. Impede their advance, but avoid full engagement. We must husband our strength." Torin dipped his head, his gaze burning with fierce devotion. He gathered his unit and vanished into the gloom. The first sounds of conflict echoed the grind of steel, the snarls of canines, the cries of the injured. The air vibrated with suspense. "They probe our defenses," Ilara observed, brow furrowed, searching for vulnerabilities. Ronan paced, his senses straining. "They are organized. More so than anticipated. This has been meticulously planned." He halted, facing the remaining warriors. "Brace yourselves. They will breach the perimeter. We must defend the pack house to our last breath." He turned to Ilara, his voice softening marginally. "Stay close. I will not allow you to be harmed." His words brought solace, yet also responsibility. She didn't seek protection. She craved to fight, to defend her home. "I can fight, Ronan," she insisted, her voice firm. "I am not helpless." He regarded her, his gaze a mix of concern and admiration. "I know that, but your safety is paramount. The pack requires a Luna, and I." He trailed off, unable to articulate the sentiment. The ground bucked again, more violently this time. A section of the outer wall splintered, and a flood of enemy wolves swarmed through the gap, eyes gleaming with malice. "They're here," Ronan gritted, drawing his blade. "For the pack, for our home." He plunged into the fray, his sword a shimmering arc in the torchlight. Ilara followed hard on his heels, seizing a discarded spear. Savagery erupted around them. Wolves wrestled in a tempest of fur and claws. The air choked with the stench of spilled blood and the din of war. Ilara fought with a primal strength she hadn't known she possessed, utilizing her agility to her advantage. She weaved through the tumult, striking at unguarded spots, felling enemy wolves with surprising efficiency. But they were outnumbered. The enemy seemed limitless, their numbers constantly renewed. The Blackwood pack fought with valor, yet they were slowly giving ground. Ronan fought with preternatural fury, his rage lending force to each strike. He became a vortex of destruction, carving through enemy ranks. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. Ilara noticed an enemy wolf closing on Ronan from behind, fangs exposed. Instinct took over. She hurled herself in front of Ronan, absorbing the onslaught. The wolf's fangs pierced her shoulder, sending a wave of agony through her. She cried out, but remained standing. She tightened her grip on the spear and plunged it into the wolf's chest, killing it instantly. Ronan spun around, his eyes widening in horror. "Ilara!" He lunged to her side, his face a landscape of concern. "Are you hurt?" "I'm all right," she gasped, clutching her wound. "Just a scratch." "A scratch?" Ronan bellowed, his voice thick with fury. He swept her up in his arms, disregarding her struggles. "I told you to stay near. I pledged to keep you safe." "I am keeping you safe," Ilara countered, her voice weak yet defiant. "Now release me. We have a battle to win." Ronan hesitated, then slowly set her back down. He looked at her, his eyes conveying a complex torrent anger, dread, and something more. Something akin to love. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice softer now. "Let me deal with this." He whirled back to the conflict, his fury renewed. He fought with escalating intensity, spurred by his fear for Ilara's well-being. The tide began to shift. The Blackwood pack, emboldened by Ronan's bravery and Ilara's fortitude, fought with redoubled resolve. They forced back the enemy, slowly reclaiming lost territory. The enemy Alpha, a hulking brute with a scarred visage, roared in frustration. He targeted Ronan, his eyes blazing with hatred. "Blackwood," he thundered, "your reign ends here. Your pack will crumble, and your Luna will be mine." Ronan met his glare, his eyes filled with scorn. "You will not touch her," he snarled. "She is under my protection, and I will slaughter anyone who dares lay a hand on her." The two alphas collided, their swords sparking in a violent dance. The battle climaxed, the fate of the Blackwood pack hanging precariously. Ominous clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the chaos gripping the pack house, promising a night painted in blood and fire. Turning the tide the force meant for Ronan crashed through Ilara, a lingering throb mingling with newfound acuity. Steel shrieked. Wolves snarled their rage, and blood perfumed the air with metallic tang, a vortex of conflict. Yet, in the heart of the storm, a strange serenity arose, a fragile intuition, a silent alteration in the combat's cadence. It resonated like a phantom pulse deep in her spirit. Ilara understood with a start. It was Ronan. Not him exactly, but the imprint of his mind, his plans, his very being carried on the unwanted tether between them. Broken, distorted like a radio signal lost in static, yet undeniably present. An unnerving, electrifying possibility bloomed. She could foresee their strikes. Ronan, locked in a savage dance with the Alpha, a mountainous brute whose speed belied his size, bellowed an unheard command. But Ilara received it, crisp as a spoken word, in her mind. A feint was planned, a shift leftward, luring the Alpha from the weakened east. East flank, prepare. Ilara's shouts sliced through the din, edged with an authority previously unknown. They're aiming for the gap, shield wall. The warriors there, weary and beaten, hesitated. They'd heard Ilara's voice before, mostly flinging defiance at their Alpha. Doubt flickered a question of allegiance, but the sheer urgency in her voice, the unwavering conviction in her stance, halted their uncertainty. Young Liam, barely a man but fiercely loyal, barked, "Do it! Now!" His order, born of desperation and growing respect for Ilara's spirit, spurred them. They moved, shields locking. A tight, impervious wall as the enemy wolves, spearheaded by a snarling lieutenant, surged ahead, anticipating easy gains. The impact was a brutal symphony of bone and metal, but the shield held firm. The onslaught faltered, its rhythm broken. The lieutenant howled in frustration, the advantage lost. Ronan, fury and wonder warring in his gaze, flicked a glance at Ilara. He'd sensed the enemy's altered plan, but had not voiced the strategy. He'd barely formed the thought. How had she discerned it? Ilara met his stare, her features inscrutable. Not now. She simply gestured west, where another contingent massed, poised to exploit a breach. "West flank exposed," she declared. "They're going to try to outflank, shift center to reinforce." Hesitation again. Doubt lingered. But the seed of trust had sprouted. Her foresight on the east had been validated. The tide of battle had shifted, hope ignited. One by one, they obeyed. The center pivoted, bolstering the western defenses as the enemy attacked. The combat raged, intense and savage. But the Blackwood pack, emboldened by Ilara's prescience, stood defiant. The advantage was turning. Adrenaline and the unsettling link with Ronan coursed through Ilara. She saw the flow of battle, divining weaknesses invisible to others. She was a conduit, amplifying Ronan's genius with her own steely will. Ronan, still battling the Alpha, sensed the change. His pack's renewed vitality, the wave of hope lifting their hearts. He felt the inescapable pull of the bond, Ilara's thoughts echoing his own. Denial was impossible. She was no pawn. She was a force, a warrior in truth. He roared, primal and fierce, and pressed his attack. He glimpsed an opening in the Alpha's guard and struck with brutal precision. The Alpha faltered, momentarily off balance. "Now!" Ilara's cry rang out. "Strike! They're vulnerable." The Blackwood pack surged, their attacks coordinated, movements precise. The enemy line buckled, then broke. The tide had truly turned. The Alpha, defeated and enraged, lunged at Ronan, desperation his only weapon. Ronan deflected the blow, muscles screaming, senses at their peak. This was the end. Then, something unexpected. Ilara, moving with startling swiftness, flung herself in front of Ronan, intercepting the Alpha's attack. No thought, just instinct. The blow landed, less forceful than it would have been on Ronan, but it still knocked her back, searing pain blooming in her shoulder. Ronan roared, protective rage blazing in his eyes. He shoved Ilara behind him, turning on the Alpha with cold fury. "You will regret that," he growled, a chilling vow. The battle continued, but the balance had shifted. The Blackwood Pack, fired by Ilara's courage and Ronan's resolve, fought with renewed ferocity, driving the enemy back to their territory's border. The Alpha, wounded and broken, finally signaled retreat. As the last fled, leaving carnage in their wake, silence fell. The Blackwood Pack stood weary, scarred, yet triumphant. They had defended their home. They had survived. Ronan turned to Ilara, his gaze a complex tapestry of concern, gratitude, and a flicker of something she couldn't name. He reached out, his hand hovering near her injured shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice unusually gentle. Ilara met his gaze, her heart pounding. She was still reeling. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just tired." Ronan nodded, his eyes searching. More than tired. She was changed. Everything was different. The marking, once an act of rage, had evolved. A bond, a connection, a responsibility, and he was adrift. United we stand, the air tasted of pine needles and metallic tang. A harsh bouquet, Ilara now associated with the specter of conflict. Beside her, Ronan moved with the lethal efficiency of a honed predator, each parry a calculated strike, each guttural growl a dark promise. Back to back, they stood, a vortex of claw and steel against the encroaching tide of rivals. Ilara felt a throb where she'd taken the earlier blow, a ghost of pain, insignificant next to the potent energy surging within, amplified by her nascent connection to Ronan. Deflecting a strike aimed at his temple, the shock reverberated up her arm. "They're singling you out!" she shouted, the din swallowing most of the words. "Their Alpha must be desperate to seize your territory." A snarl tore from Ronan's throat as he silenced a wolf with brutal finality. Let him try. Yet, Ilara sensed the shift in their tactics, the focused fury directed solely at their leader. This wasn't simply about land. It was a vendetta. This Alpha wanted Ronan eliminated, and the realization chilled her to the core. She moved with renewed speed and ferocity, a wall of defiance against every assault on Ronan. "Ilara, disengage!" he roared, a primal note edging his voice. "You're wounded." "Not happening," she snapped, her gaze unwavering. Their connection, her strength, gave them an advantage. Withdrawal would be a fatal error. Then she saw him, the rival Alpha, a mountain of muscle with obsidian eyes, carving a path through the ranks, his gaze locked onto Ronan. He pounced, a blur of savage intent, and Ilara reacted without conscious thought, intercepting him. But this time, it wasn't a physical attack she met. It was a psychic onslaught, a wave of pure malevolence aimed at shattering Ronan's concentration. The impact staggered her, a searing agony that threatened to unravel her sanity. Visions assaulted her: Ronan's insecurities, his burdens, the crippling weight of leadership. It was an invasion, a violation, and she fought back with every fiber of her being. She countered the intrusion, drawing upon her own inner fortitude, the resilience forged in the fires of hardship and grief. Glimpses of her life flashed her mother's serene smile, the cozy warmth of the hearth, the faces of her pack she had sworn to protect. And then, overriding everything, was Ronan. Not the stoic alpha, but the man she had glimpsed underneath, the one who bore the burden of his pack. The one who, despite his gruff exterior, had offered her fleeting moments of solace. The strength of her defense caught their attacker by surprise. He stumbled back, momentarily blindsided. And in that sliver of opportunity, Ronan retaliated. A deafening cry echoed as Ronan became a whirlwind of fury, a force of nature unleashed upon his foe. Their confrontation was a savage dance of desperation, a brutal struggle for supremacy. Ilara watched, her pulse pounding, as Ronan fought with unparalleled ferocity. This wasn't just about territory, it was about protecting his own, his responsibility, his people, and, she realized with a start, perhaps even her. She saw a shadow of uncertainty flicker in his rival's gaze, a hesitation that proved fatal. Ronan exploited it, his fangs finding their mark. The fight ceased. Silence claimed the field, broken only by the ragged panting of the survivors. The rival pack, demoralized by their leader's fall, dispersed, fading back into the darkness. Ronan stood over his vanquished foe, chest heaving, eyes burning with a primal intensity. He turned toward Ilara, his gaze piercing, and for the first time, she witnessed something other than anger or disdain. It was respect, and something more, something profound, that stole her breath. "You saved me," he rasped, his voice rough-edged. Again. "We saved each other," she countered, her voice trembling slightly. He closed the distance, his presence overwhelming. "I underestimated you, Ilara. You marked me in anger," she reminded him, the words a soft accusation. He recoiled, the admission a visible wound. "I know, and I regret it, every damn day." His words hung in the air, heavy with remorse. Ilara was at a loss. She had harbored so much animosity toward him for so long that the notion of forgiveness seemed alien. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. She tensed, wary of his intent. But then, he simply brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead, his touch surprisingly tender. "You are strong, Ilara," he murmured, his voice low. "Stronger than I ever believed. Brave, selfless, fiercely loyal. You possess all the qualities of a true Luna." His words were a soothing balm. She had constantly questioned her worth, her place within the pack. Hearing his affirmation, seeing the sincerity in his gaze, allowed her to entertain, just for a moment, the possibility that she could be more than a forced mate. "I don't desire you as my Luna out of duty," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "I desire you to be my Luna through your own choice." He stepped back, offering her space, offering her a decision. The weight of his words settled upon her, a summons, an invitation. "The pack needs you, Ilara," he pleaded, his voice raw. "I need you." She glanced at the faces surrounding them, their eyes reflecting hope and gratitude. She saw the injured being cared for, the weary guardians standing watch, the children huddled together for reassurance. They had all fought valiantly, united against a shared enemy. And in that instant, she understood what she had to do. "United we stand," she declared, her voice ringing out. "Divided we fall." She moved forward, bridging the space between them. She met Ronan's gaze, her own filled with resolve. I choose to stand with you, Ronan Blackwood, she stated. As your Luna, as your partner, as your mate. A genuine smile illuminated Ronan's face, a transformation that reached his eyes. He reached for her hand, his grip strong and reassuring. Then let us stand together, he replied, his voice infused with a new hope. And rebuild our pack together. A chorus of cheers erupted, a wave of relief and appreciation washing over them. They had won the battle, but the war loomed. More obstacles, more threats, more sacrifices awaited. But as Ilara stood beside Ronan, hand clasped in his, she had no doubt that they could confront anything, so long as they faced it as one. The bond they shared, born from anger and tempered by sacrifice, had become a symbol of promise, a testament to the healing power of forgiveness, and an assurance of a future where, united, they would endure. A public apology, the air hummed with the echoes of combat, a cocktail of pine and coppery blood assaulting Ilara's senses. Beside her, Ronan's presence was a sturdy anchor in the storm still raging within her. The pack had coalesced, fatigue and relief stark upon their features, a silent accounting of the brutal night. They waited for Ronan's pronouncements, his authority absolute, his respect fiercely earned. He moved forward, his gaze traversing the assembled wolves. The mantle of leadership pressed down on him, visible in the taut line of his mouth, the somber depths of his eyes. Gone was the furious Alpha who had impulsively marked her. Here stood a leader, a guardian, a man weighed down by the stewardship of them all. Tonight, we held fast to our land, Ronan declared, his voice a resonant force. We stared down a threat, and we emerged unbroken. But triumph demands its due. He paused, his eyes finding Ilara's. The atmosphere thickened, the silence stretched, brimming with unspoken truths. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she met his calm stare, sensing what was coming. I was reckless, Ronan admitted, his voice now threading with a stark honesty that resonated through the pack. I let fury dictate my actions. I marked Ilara not from affection, but from resentment. A collective intake of breath swept through the throng. Heads swiveled, eyes widening in disbelief. Such an open confession was unheard of, a violation of Alpha custom, a display of vulnerability that left them speechless. Ronan stood firm, his eyes unwavering. My actions were wrong. They were unjust, and they inflicted pain on one deserving only honor. He turned fully to face Ilara, his gaze brimming with a remorse that seemed to materialize as a tangible thing between them. Ilara, he murmured, his voice softer now, imbued with a sincerity that touched her core. I offer you my deepest, most heartfelt apology. I am truly sorry for the suffering I have caused you. A knot formed in Ilara's throat. She might have anticipated a private apology, a quiet acknowledgement of his error. But this public display of penance surpassed anything she could have conceived. It was a humbling act, a shedding of the Alpha's invincibility, a vulnerable offering of his very heart. My mark was not a symbol of love, Ronan continued, his voice ringing with conviction. But I vow to you, before our pack, that I will spend every day earning your trust, earning your respect, and earning your love. He took a step towards her, his hand reaching out, hesitating a hair's breadth from her cheek. I know I have much to atone for. I know the path ahead is long, but I promise you, Ilara, I will not falter. A ripple of murmurs passed through the pack, a blend of astonishment and dawning understanding. They had witnessed Ronan's rage, his protectiveness, his struggle to harness the forced bond. But they had also seen his resilience, his valor, and his unwavering fealty to his pack. Now they were seeing something more profound: his capacity for regret, his willingness to own his failings, his resolve to make amends. "I know some of you may question my decision," Ronan said, turning back to address the pack. "You may wonder why I would choose to lay bare my imperfections in this manner, but I believe in truth. I believe in taking responsibility, and I believe in the transformative power of forgiveness." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his pack, seeking understanding, acceptance. Ilara is a woman of strength, intelligence, and profound empathy. She has repeatedly proven her allegiance to this pack. She deserves respect, deserves affection, and deserves to be my Luna. A groundswell of support surged through the ranks. Nods of affirmation, murmurs of approval. They had seen Ilara's fearlessness in battle, her steadfast dedication to the pack. They had seen her kindness, her compassion, her willingness to aid those in need. Initially, they had resented her, an outsider thrust upon them. But in time, she had secured their respect, their loyalty, and their affection. "We stand with you, Alpha," a voice called from the crowd. It was Gareth, Ronan's beta, his right hand, his most trusted confidant. "We have seen Ilara's strength of spirit. We have seen her commitment. She is one of us." Other voices chimed in, echoing Gareth's words. "Aye, Alpha. She's proven her mettle. She's pack now. We accept her claim." The pack's affirmation washed over Ilara, a wave of acceptance that soothed the ache in her heart. Ronan turned back to Ilara, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you," he breathed, his voice barely audible above the low hum of the crowd. "Thank you for your strength, your courage, and your willingness to forgive me." He reached out again, this time enfolding her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, reassuring. "I love you, Ilara," he said, his voice ringing clear and strong, his words resonating with an emotional depth that left no room for doubt. "I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you." Ilara's heart lifted. She had never anticipated hearing those words from him. She had never dared hope that he could truly love her. But as she gazed into his eyes, she saw the truth mirrored back at her. She saw the remorse, the regret, the genuine affection that had been buried beneath layers of anger and pride. And she saw something more, a love that was as fierce and unwavering as the wolf that resided within him. "I believe you," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I believe you can earn my love." She squeezed his hand, her heart brimming with a mix of hope and trepidation. The journey ahead would be long and arduous. There would be trials to face, hurdles to overcome. But as long as they faced them together, as long as their bond held true, she knew they could endure anything. Ronan's face broke into a smile, a genuine, heartfelt expression that transformed his features. He bent and kissed her, a tender, passionate kiss that sealed their bond, a promise of a future filled with love, respect, and unwavering devotion. A roar erupted from the pack, their voices echoing through the trees, a celebration of a fresh start, a testament to the power of absolution, and a declaration of their unwavering support for their Alpha and their Luna. The weight of leadership still pressed upon Ronan's shoulders, heavy and unrelenting. But now, he no longer bore it alone. He had Ilara at his side, a partner, a confidant, a love. And together, They would confront whatever challenges awaited, united in their purpose, bound by their love, and committed to protecting their pack. The forced marking had been an act of rage, a moment of folly. But from the wreckage of that error, something extraordinary had bloomed. A love that was stronger, more resilient, and more profound than anything they could have ever imagined. A Luna's heart, the silence following Ronan's avowal felt like a suffocating blanket, heavy with unspoken truths and fragile expectation. Ilara remained still, the weight of his unveiled soul, his heartfelt apology, pressing upon her like a physical burden. A low susurrus rippled through the pack, a primal tremor that resonated up through her very core. She studied Ronan then, truly studied him, shedding the layers of alpha, fury, and the imposed connection. Beneath it all, she perceived a man laid bare, searching for atonement. The sharpness usually blazing in his gaze was softened by a desperate entreaty, mirroring the ache within her. Could she offer absolution? Could she gamble on trust? Could a bond forged in animosity be reborn in affection? The answer, she discerned, had already taken root deep within her, awaiting the right moment to blossom. She had witnessed his transformation, the quiet fortitude that had supplanted arrogance, the genuine regret etching softer lines onto his face. He was striving with all his might to embody the man she believed him capable of becoming. Summoning courage, Ilara closed the distance that had separated them. The pack's murmurs died down, every eye riveted on her, anticipating her judgment. Tentatively, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly, she brushed his cheek. The contact sparked a vibrant current through her, a potent reminder of their interwoven fates. Whether welcomed or not, "Ronan," she began, her voice soft yet resolute. "I heard you." His breath caught, surprise widening his pupils. "Ilara, I accepted your apology," she pressed on, "and I believe your sincerity. I see the truth of it etched in your expression." An audible wave of astonishment swept through the gathered wolves. Such unreserved forgiveness was unexpected, unheard of. Ronan's jaw clenched, his eyes scrutinizing hers, as if afraid to embrace the reality of her words. "But," Ilara continued, her voice gaining firmness, "trust isn't freely dispensed. It must be earned through devotion, and your journey has only just begun." A shadow of pain flickered across his features, but he offered a nod of understanding. "I know this, and I am prepared to walk that path. I will dedicate myself to winning back your trust, for as long as it takes." A small, fragile smile graced her lips, holding a promise of burgeoning hope. "Then we shall begin." Ronan's hand covered hers against his cheek, his touch a beacon of warmth and reassurance. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice thick with nascent emotion, "I am unworthy of you." "Perhaps," she countered, her gaze unwavering. "But maybe, just perhaps, we are worthy of each other." Those words, like a delicate span, connected two wounded souls. Ronan's grip tightened on her hand, his knuckles straining. He shut his eyes briefly, as though gathering his reserves, then opened them, his gaze now resolute. "Let me demonstrate my worth," he declared, his tone firm and unshakable. "Let me prove I can embody the man you deserve, the alpha your pack deserves, the mate you deserve." Ilara's heart performed a frantic dance within her chest. This was the crux, the point of no return. She could rebuff him, turn away, and attempt to rebuild her existence without him. Or she could surrender to the possibility of love, trusting in the man he aspired to be, and accept the destiny that had intertwined their lives. She opted for the latter. "Prove it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Prove you can cherish me, not out of obligation or duty, but from genuine love. Demonstrate that you respect me, not merely as your Luna, but as an equal partner. Strive to be the man I know dwells within. You. An intense fire blazed in Ronan's eyes, stealing her breath. He leaned closer, his lips hovering just above hers. I will, he vowed, his voice a gravelly rasp. I will lay bare my heart to you. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a forceful claim, like the impositions of the past. It was a tentative exploration, a gentle invitation, a silent plea for absolution. Ilara reciprocated, her own lips quivering against his, her heart aching with a symphony of trepidation and expectation. As their lips met, the bond between them ignited, a surge of energy cascading through their intertwined veins, connecting them on a level beyond spoken language. It was a raw, primal connection, a testament to the potent magic that held them captive. But now, it felt different. No, it felt reciprocal. Now, it tasted of love. The kiss deepened, their bodies gravitating closer, their hearts synchronized. The pack erupted in a celebratory roar, the sound reverberating through the forest, a testament to their union, a harbinger of a promising future. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Ilara knew an irreversible change had occurred. The forced bond remained, but it was no longer a constraint. It had transformed into a bridge, a pathway towards something beautiful, something substantial, something real. Ronan regarded her, adoration shining in his eyes. I love you, Ilara, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. I truly, deeply love you. Ilara's heart took flight. She had waited an eternity to hear those words, doubting they would ever be uttered with genuine feeling. And yet, here they were, proclaimed with such conviction, such candor, that she couldn't help but succumb to their truth. I think I'm beginning to love you too, Ronan, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. A cascade of relief washed over his face. He drew her close, embracing her tightly. Then let us construct a future together, Ilara, he murmured into her hair. Let us forge a pack built on strength and justice, a pack that cherishes love and respect, a pack worthy of your leadership. Ilara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had traversed such a difficult path, had endured so much hardship, and now, at last, she was discovering her place, her purpose, her love. As dusk settled, painting the clearing in long shadows, Ronan and Ilara stood hand in hand, facing their pack. The wolves voiced their approval in a unified chorus of howls filled with hope. Ronan raised a hand, silencing the pack. My brothers and sisters, he announced, his voice carrying with strength and clarity. I have stumbled countless times. I have been ruled by anger and pride, and I have caused harm to those I swore to protect. But I have learned from my failings, and I pledge to become a better Alpha, a more just leader, a better Ra. Man. He turned towards Ilara, his gaze filled with veneration. And I dedicate myself to earning the love and trust of my Luna, Ilara Meadowlight. She is the embodiment of strength, compassion, and courage. I am honored beyond measure to have her stand by my side. Ilara met his gaze with a radiant smile, her heart expanding with pride. She stepped forward, clasping Ronan's hand in hers. United, she declared, her voice ringing with determination. We will build a pack worthy of our ancestors, a pack that will flourish for generations to come. We shall confront every challenge, surmount every obstacle, and emerge stronger and more unified than before." The pack responded with uproarious cheers that filled the forest. They had witnessed a profound transformation, a redemption story, a love that had blossomed against all odds. They embraced the future, led by an Alpha who had learned from his past and a Luna who had taught them the true meaning of strength and compassion. As the celebrations continued, Ilara and Ronan stole away, seeking respite and intimacy. They discovered a secluded haven by the river, the water shimmering under the moonlight. Ronan turned to Ilara, his eyes soft with tenderness. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice sincere. "Thank you for extending forgiveness, for holding faith in me, for granting me a second chance." Ilara reached out and caressed his cheek, her fingers tracing the contours of his jaw. "Gratitude is unnecessary," she assured him. "Our fates are intertwined, Ronan, whether we wished it so or not. And I believe we can cultivate something extraordinary from this bond, something that will empower us both." Ronan leaned down and kissed her again, a slow, lingering kiss that conveyed the depths of love, forgiveness, and hope. As they stood entwined, Ilara knew she had finally found her rightful place, her driving purpose, her home. She was a Luna, a leader, and a lover. She was ready to embrace her destiny, hand in hand with the Alpha who had once marked her in anger, but now loved her with all his being.